Hello, everyone. This is Julie from August Birdsong, and I'm here today with my July design team project for the Graphics Fairy premium membership website. And for the month of July, I decided to take us to the beach. But we're going to be visiting it via train and vintage automobile and going back to the year 1916. And I picked that year because it was kind of right at the beginning of a new era. The Edwardian era was underway, but the Victorian era, which was very conservative and all, was coming to an end. And we have this time period of machines and travel and discovery and science and everything coming together, and the world sort of just erupting in all these new discoveries and abilities for everyday life. And so one of the things that was real interesting is that with train travel, you had a lot of people who had moved to the cities, like these people possibly, who were living in hot, non-air conditioned apartments. And because at this point, train fare, was reasonable for a lot of the working class, they could go out just for the day to the beach. And so the idea of actually having a weekend, simple getaway days to do something like go swim in the ocean was totally novel and new in 1916. And swimming actually in the ocean was also new. People hadn't been doing that. And the ocean was something sort of for sailors and such. So here you can see I have a very large binder again. I have used jelly prints I had in my stash. These are just very basic, just different colors that I rolled onto the jelly plate and pulled. And I really liked the pattern they made, so I've been holding on to them. I've added a bunch of images from the Graphics Fairy, a lot of their ocean, nautical, sea life, sea creatures, seashells, those bundles, the images in them. And I've enlarged them on my own Google documents and then cut them out, put them on adhesive squares. In this case, I'm not sure if it's a creature exactly or just an artistic image of the, ocean life, but I've turned it into a clock. And the hands actually move on it. I just have them connected underneath it with some brads. And I did that as sort of a sign of time, possibly running out, or the times are changing, that kind of idea. And here we have the jellyfish and a seahorse and such. On the cover here, I also added the light bulb to represent, that surge of technology and electricity, let's not forget, along with this festive ocean picture, vintage ocean picture. And opening it up, and I'll take the pages out in a minute here and show them to you. We have this particular type of background on the back of the front cover and the back cover, which we'll get to. And I've titled this Beyond the Boardwalk, because what happened is there was sort of, there was a lot of etiquette left over from the Victorian age, and people were wearing bathing suits and sort of a confusion about when should I have, my long dress on and full suits and all of that, and when can I walk around in the bathing suit, and where did that need to have a boundary? And it actually became kind of the norm that people would, put on proper dress clothes for everything from the boardwalk back to the hotel and all of that. Anybody beyond the boardwalk on the beach, well, then etiquette was a lot more relaxed. But first, we've got to get to the beach. So here, I've used the train from the European train travel bundle. I enlarged it, like I've said before, on my Google document, and then cut it out. And I wanted that sense of movement on the page, so I put adhesive dots behind it. And this is just a die cut for, I can't even think of what it's actually called. It's sort of like cut out or torn out paper die. And this is, like the other part you get when you cut that die. And I just had it on, some old scrap paper or packaging. And I used that to sort of represent the train track there, just to add to it. I've added some quotes from that same European travel. There's a page of quotes all about travel. And this one says, "Don't listen to what they say, go see." And I also added my own little stamping here saying day trippers, because those were the people who didn't have the money to actually stay in the resorts, which was very costly and really reserved for the upper classes. But they wanted to get to the beach and have a day out. And so they were called day trippers. So, turning the page here, and it's full, so it's going to be a little wonky here as I go from page to page. But here we're going to the beach, and if we're not on the train, then here I found this on the archives, and it's just like a vintage postcard. And I went ahead and I just put some little hinges on the back and turned it into a pocket. And I like to do that a lot. You can take something that might normally be a tag or a picture and turn it into a pocket. And that works real well with like a bigger design or image. And so here I found this. It was a vintage ad about train travel. And it says a mile a minute. And again, railway locomotive. And on this side, I just put another down by the sea one. I think this is from Ocean Blues, possibly. I have the word U-boats because in 1916, World War I was underway in Europe, and America would get involved in the war within a year. But there was a great fear of German U-boats reaching the American coastline. And so there was, a lot of updates about sightings or, fear of that in the newspapers. So I have some other things here. Now I added this page to represent just the technology and science and advancement of that age. I mean, this is part of the industrial age of the 1800s, well underway. And I added this die cut here from a bundle. It's I think Gears and something. I can't think of the full name of it. But I just enlarged it. It's on adhesive squares. And I took a broken necklace, the chain of it, and, just kind of cut off a section. And then those little brads, with the little pokey ends, I just poked them through the chain and then through the back of this and mounted it all on an adhesive adhesive squares, if you can see that there, just to again, a way to embellish and create that sense of machinery and mechanics. Electricity, a lot of people still didn't live with electricity, but the hotels along the beaches were advertising like resorts with 500 light bulbs in them, and that was big news. I had a clock here with a little brad through it, and I use a lot of time in this one as a symbol, just representing with factories and machinery and consumerism, that time is money, and there was this constant production, this wheel of energy and excitement around creating and selling. And for some people, making, a lot of money. Science was also progressing. And in fact, in 1916, The world was only a year or two away from the flu epidemic, the influenza that hit. Technically, 1918 is when that hit, and they didn't even have antibiotics or anything to help with that. But in 1916, the concern along the east coast of the United States was a rise in polio cases, and there was no vaccine. And children especially were being hit with infant paralysis from the polio. And so that was a big newsmaker at that time. Turning this page here, I just have kind of this man from the Digi People kit reminded me of, big businessman. Maybe he owns a railroad or a factory. But he and his family would want to go away to the beach, probably staying in one of the wealthy resorts for the summertime. And with the train, he could get back into town for business, but his family would be comfortable there and safe from the threat, or at least they thought, of polio, because the cities became, very big spreaders of something like polio, influenza, and all that. And so it was another thing. People wanted to go to the beach, get out in the country in the fresh air to get away from illness and disease. And then here we just have some suitcases and things to represent the holiday and getting away. Here's another man from the Digi People kit. And again, I was thinking, more of the wealthy business owners and their families. And this is just a fun page. Again, I had this whole thing in my stash. So I just added that to, represent what a vacation might mean: playing cards, puzzles, bingo, fishing, or at least looking at the fish. And notice I didn't use a lot of floral imagery on this one. I kept it to just the natural world, like the fish and shells and things, but also the mechanical aspect of it. And I just used these kind of die-cut gears to represent that technology. Turning it over, this is an envelope, and an envelope with a window. Maybe something like this yellow, maybe a little smaller, but something like this envelope on top here that I put, paper on, decorated, stitched it, and then I tucked this image of the woman on the beach behind that. And I ended up pretty much closing it off, because with the stitching and all, it became kind of tight to put other things in. This image here on this background paper reminds me almost of a train station or a tunnel. But I also liked the colors of it with the shells and just the natural world by the beach. And then it opens, and this is the back of that envelope, which did have a pocket, but like I said, I closed it because it was so tight. I just decided to keep it as it was, and I built my own little pocket down here. Here's an image I found online. I'm not sure if it's a photograph, like a modern photo of a woman in costume, or a painting. I wasn't sure, but it totally reminded me of Mary on Downton Abbey, if you're familiar with that show, and her getting off the train. And she's dressed pretty much the way they would have been dressing in 1916. Here's an advertisement just for Midland Railway Country Seaside Holidays, and this was it looks like in Scotland. Isle of Man. And so that was in the archives and all. And then throughout, I used those quotes and words from the European travel kit. This says, sometimes the wrong train takes you to the right station. And here are those vintage cars that are graphics I found on the archives, and I just resized them to make a little border print here on a Google document. Here's another train scene from the European travel. This is on a background of, I think this might be in the end paper, You can find it under backgrounds if you just look at printables like backgrounds as well. But I like it for the sort of beach and seaside feel, like pebbles and sand. And then here are some more images. These I actually found just in the public domain looking for images of train travel and going to the beach photos. This one is actually, it was a colorized vintage photo. And it says Parker's Tea and Luncheon Tent. And this was, a fancy outing at the seaside, maybe a private gathering. But I loved this painting, very impressionistic to a certain extent, of people riding on the train. And then here was another colorized vintage photo of just a beach. I think these might have been from Europe. And I'm going to talk about, if you can see these carriages in the background, they look like big square boxes on the beach right there. Those are like bathing huts. And we'll talk about that throughout at times. The horses would drag these out to different parts just in the close to shore area. And I think they were open inside, like with benches, and you could put your feet in them. And then you could also come sit on the front or back edge of it. The horses would go back to shore and leave you out there for a time. But you could rent these, and, people would do it, men and women, especially very dignified women who were self-conscious about, something as public as bathing, like to, go in those bathing carriages. And here is an image from the graphics fairy of a man hauling a trunk, and I'm sure it was very heavy. Now, in 1916, this was also a real tumultuous time for the suffragette movement. And at least in the United States, women had not been able to vote yet. They had in a few Western states, but not, just nationwide. And so I found some images of the suffragettes. And this one says, "We were voters out west. Why deny our rights in the east?" And what that's referring to is in the later 1800s, states like Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, and maybe Colorado, granted them the right to vote, but it was really to encourage young women to come out because there were so many men working out there as ranchers and, herding cattle and gold rush and all of that they needed wives. And so that's why they were granted that ability to vote out west. It was, what do you want to call it? Like the hook to kind of draw the women out west, but they didn't have the votes around the rest of the nation. And in fact, this is a picture from around 1916. It says, "Headquarters, National Association opposed to women's suffrage." And of course, here we have some men here, looking at whatever the paperwork was that was offered out there. And so this was, a real tug of war. And it wasn't until 1919 and then 1920 that it was ratified, I think is the word, with the 19th Amendment, that women in the United States had the right and freedom to vote. Now, this was an interesting little picture I found. This is a suffragette on a scooter, of all things. I've never seen a picture like this from back then. It makes me think of all the scooters you can, find on for kids especially out there now. And this was an ad about, again, suffrage. And there's a man in a sailboat, and he has the votes. And here are the women in the rowboat, and it says handicapped. And so again, really struggling to get that right. I put a clock again on this one. This one doesn't move, but to represent time, and that, the time was ticking with their cause, and hopefully they'd get freedom to vote. And here we have a woman on a bicycle, and I put that because in the 1880s and 90s, as bicycle riding became more common, and especially for women, it gave them a freedom they didn't have. They didn't need a chaperone constantly. Styles like hoop skirts and bustles started to go out along with the corsets. So they gained freedom with their own clothing and, health as far as being able to breathe without the corset. And down here is just another advertisement, women helping with World War I. It says every girl pulling for victory, Victory Girls United War Work Campaign. And this might have been from Europe at the time, but maybe it was American once they were in the war. And then here I just enlarged a big automobile, put it on dots, adhesive squares in 3 areas, but left it open on the top so I could use it as a tuck spot for my suffragettes there. Okay. And so turning the page, this is a collage I actually made a few years ago or a year and a half ago, just to represent, being at the hotels and the resorts. And on the inside page here, we have a wealthy man here. He has his large trunk. Maybe he's brought his family out to the resort. Maybe he'll have a chance to do a little gambling or play the cards a little. His wife probably was able to luxuriate in one of these kind of personal passenger train cars. Look at that. It's like their version of a sofa. Quite nice compared to, think of crowded air travel today. And then just an image of the beach. And a man could, bring his family out and enjoy themselves at a resort, something like this. I found this, it's the Ingleside. This is actually a picture of the tennis club, but this is the whole resort in Beach Haven, New Jersey, right around 1916 from the looks. So really huge. You can see Victorian structures. And here's a vintage photo of a bellboy. And this is from one of the Instant Ancestors, I think. I found that in at the Graphics Ferry, the bellboy. And on this side, I have some images of some women who were working gals. And I came across an interesting article that said women became the telephone operators after men who had been doing that job were getting in too many arguments with customers and clients on the line. And women seem to have fewer problems with that, with talking to and dealing with customers and transferring calls and such. So that was sort of interesting. And then there's this photo. I would assume she was a secretary taking dictation there. And it says, bossy. Who, me? You can tell from her look. Oh, wouldn't want to give her trouble. And then here's a vintage photo of a busy city street. We have a trolley being pulled by horses. Maybe another trolley. I'm not sure if that one's being pulled by horses or is electric at that point. You had horse-drawn carriages, and you can hardly see it, but there's an automobile tire right at the edge here. So the streets were getting extremely crowded in the cities, busy. And I found this cute photo. I think it's actually from maybe a 1920s movie or something. So it's a little ahead of the time, but it got the idea across of crowding and how busy things were in the city and why people would want to get out to the country and the ocean and the beach and all for a vacation. Okay. Moving on here, we're getting to the American dream again of working and, making money and achieving a comfortable lifestyle. And not a lot of people, achieve the status of this man in his tennis outfit and his fancy car. But the trains did, like I said before, give, working class people a lot more opportunity for some relaxation time and kind of mini vacations. And so here you have that. And we're finally getting to the beach here. Here's a vintage photo of a woman and maybe her daughters at the beach. And again, this background here is all from European train travel. Here's definitely sort of, she could be an Edwardian woman. On the back is more of a traditional Victorian grandmother, probably, who would have been staying at the resort. And here are more of those little photos of the little, what was the name? Swim houses. I know that's not the name, but that they would pull out. And these women are walking over to one, and this man is either just done hooking one up or getting a horse hooked up, maybe to the one they're going to take. And so there you have that. Here are some young women, not sure if they're coming or going, but it looks like advertising was on the sides of those little bathhouses on wheels as well. Bathing machines, they were called. That's the name I was trying to think of. And so here you can see another picture and look at all of them, and they'd be rented out. And that's essentially what this image from the graphics fairy is showing you. This is one of those bathing machines just off to the side. You can even see the wheel here. I never noticed the wheel until I saw these pictures of the bathhouses machines. And in all these years, I never had seen those pictures, and still, until I started looking for vintage photos of ocean travel. Now here we have more of a Victorian wife, with her book, and she's formally dressed. And then here you have more of, like I was saying, with the title Beyond the Boardwalk. Beyond the Boardwalk, kind of manners and customs became much more relaxed. And in the beginning with the Victorians, it was much more segregated beaches. Women went in together, men went in together. But now we had, couples on the beach together, and romance, and, concern of the morals and standards of the time. And even silly behavior. Look at these women. These are their bathing costumes. They had tights on. And I don't know, that sounds awfully messy on a beach with a bunch of sand. And here you have this image, and these, which a lot of us have seen, these kinds of suits, they were called tube suits, and they were often wool. And it was, always an ongoing problem of whether or not your knees were exposed and whether you had the bare arms. So you can see these women were a little more dressed than the tube suit offered. But this was all, again, with the suffragettes, part of that movement of freedom and, lifting some of the societal, demands of them. Now here, for a pocket, I made this photo into a pocket with these, bunch of men. This might have been at the time more with the segregated beach areas. But along the boardwalk, or I can't think of what those are called, where it actually goes out into the sea, you can see people dressed in their, finery up there looking down. And like I said, the boardwalk was considered the line where propriety set in with your clothing and all. But here on the beach, here we have, this says a swim instructor. And I found an interesting thing saying that what we would call today lifeguards, at least in the United States, were called surf men. And they were essentially lifeguards. So there's a good chance he was also a surfman as well as an instructor. Kind of flirting there with one of his students, possibly. And here we have a little boy with a shovel digging in the sand. You can see a resort way in the background. And here's a poem from, I think it's Robert Louis Stevenson. When I was down beside the sea, a wooden spade they gave to me to dig the sandy shore. My holes were empty like a cup. In every hole the sea came up till it could come no more. And here, more of those bathing machines. And this is, like I said, people could sit on the front or back ends of it. And they were also inside. They could do that as well. Sit like on benches inside with their feet in the water. I used little printable ATC pages for these backs because then they were real quick and easy to just pop on the back of these pictures. Here's another one. You can see this woman being a little modest there and all. And so here, this is an envelope with the double windows like you get on some of your mail. Here I put this image, which I thought must be the 1920s, but I think actually some of these were bathing costumes pre-1920. So this is a vintage image from the Graphics Fairy. And you can see them. This was like a beauty contest on the shore that they were in. And then if you turn it, I also have another picture off to the side of this happy woman here under her parasol with her matching, it looks like a matching swim hat of sorts. It matches her parasol in her bathing costume. And she has the tights, and look at these. They're almost like what I think of as boxers, gym shoes or something like that. But, at the time, this was very freeing compared to a heavy dress with a corset. I've added just some advertising from that time here for an ink fountain pen. Dentures were even coming into vogue, and people with chronic dental pain. I know my grandparents who were born in the 1890s and 1900 eventually had dentures, and a lot of people were thrilled to get them because their teeth, they didn't have orthodontia. They didn't go for cleanings every 6 months. Teeth were pulled out to fix a problem, which was painful, and many people died of infection from things like blood poisoning and tools used in the mouth that were not sanitized. The dentist was a scary place to go, and usually in early times the dentist might have just been the barber. So a lot of people of that generation were thrilled when dentures came out. And then this is just a mechanical toy from that same time period. And here we're getting close to the end. We have a little boy looking out and a little girl reading at the beach. This is just a collage I made a while ago on a cereal box, and I just turned it into a pocket and glued it down. This is some oxide ink on a stamp that I stamped onto a jelly print, and then I spritzed the stamp with water right before I pressed it onto the jelly print. And this is a turtle from the Lumiere, the Sea kit that just came out in the last few weeks. And I liked how the octopus's head just tucked there. One of my decorated envelopes I've had in my stash for a while. And I doubled up a starfish and this little, what do you call it? When the video starts, I forget everything. Well, you know what I mean, from porthole, whatever, from the ship. On this side, we have a large squid coming down to the clock and a little fish here. And again, some children digging for shells and rocks and things. Here's an image from the graphics fairy, some young sailors. Loved the colors in this squid though when you enlarged him, and then I put him on dimensional dots. And here I have on an old envelope I made a shark, and in German I guess the word is Schurk, which actually means, shark came from that, and it means scoundrel, like sharks are known as scoundrels. And then here you have the fish and pufferfish, I think, and some of the others. And notice how I cut out shells and put some on the adhesive squares and some just glued to the page to create some depth. And I didn't just plunk entire shells everywhere. I tried to merge them so it just, the composition worked better that way. And then finally, this is the last section. I kind of made it into a notebook off of some of, let's see, I don't have it handy. It's like a thing that comes in these vintage binders, and it's short. And so I just attached pages to it. But here is the real focus of the sea, and this age of people in 1916, they were not overly familiar with the ocean and ocean life, only what they had heard from sailors and such, and people who lived by the sea. So they didn't necessarily understand all the creatures and sea life. This is just a little collage I had in my stash that they were coming in contact with. Here are some more vintage beach photos and those bathing machines. And these two I found in the archives, and they're just some of my favorites. They're very haunting for some reason, beautifully haunting. A young girl, maybe she lives, in a shack along the ocean there, but she's collecting mussels. And here you have sunsets and oceans, just a real pretty one. And this one, I think it's actually a painting, but it looks just like a photograph. And I found this on the archives as well. And just added that with an image of a rocky shore. And that's on a pocket made from a jelly print of mine. And again, these are quotes from the Lumiere bundle. And they're all a bunch of quotes about the ocean and sea. And this page is a beautiful page from Ocean Blues. And I call this like the mermaid page. And so I really enjoyed using her, and just have seabirds around. Coming in here, I have a flip here with a vintage Victorian woman and a mother. Let's see, I'm looking in the camera, hoping you can see that up there. And I hope I've been keeping this on the screen well enough. And on this page here, jelly print with a lot of sea life images that, again, the interesting thing about this page is that this here is actually a jellyfish. It's a different jellyfish from this one, but it has really long tentacles. And I ended up flipping it upside down and cutting the tentacles off. And I colored them green because I wanted them to be like, those flowy, ocean plant life type things. I can't think of the name for it right now. To kind of, tuck my images under to create that movement and depth. So these are actually stringy tentacles from a jellyfish just popped upside down. This is also from a mushroom, Owls and Mushrooms kit. It's a mushroom, a real strange looking mushroom. But I liked how it looked sort of like a reef, like the coral and all on a reef. And so I cut it apart, turned it sideways, put it with these sea urchins, and it totally doesn't look like a mushroom there. So there you have that page. 1916 was also the first documented year of a shark attack on a human. Now, that is not common, but it was a great white that was shot up through the jet stream to an area of the ocean along the New Jersey shore that, it was in closer than it normally would have been. And that's kind of why 1916 was significant with shark attacks. This shark, it was a very unique situation. Nothing has ever happened like it since. It ended up going all up the New Jersey shoreline into a creek called Matawan Creek, and in the process killed 5 people. And it was all over the news, even in Europe. And I actually Googled it, and you can see those vintage newsreels of it. Here's an image of just some girls playing in the sand. And a woman in one of those, the bathing sock or tube that they were called. And a final note on that shark story, and that ties with this whole journal. A lot of my information about this time period came from this book, Close to Shore, by Michael Capuzzo, that is about that great white I just mentioned. So I would recommend that if you're interested in just a great story of that time period and what life was like, as well as kind of an ocean tale of horror with that shark. This page again, this is another jelly print with a stamp of oxide ink on there, and we have whales and more jellyfish and a little, this is, I think it was an envelope that an envelope that I ended up just tucking some more pictures in, and it's an envelope from the graphics fair. You can just print them off on the printables section, and some advertisements. I put some quotes on the back. And the interesting thing on this side is these are Japanese women. This is a vintage photo, actually from 1916, of some Japanese women in the ocean. Now, I'm not sure if it was on the Jersey Shore or off of the coast of Japan, but I found that one interesting. Another envelope, mother and child. And then here you can see how crowded the beach became with day trippers. And here it says all suits sterilized and econopolies. And so you could rent bathing suits, it looks like. I don't know if I'd want to do that, but I suppose, if you were just out for the day and didn't get to the beach much, it might have been a smart thing to do. And then finally here, another big jelly print pocket, some images here of a fisherman and maybe his grandchildren, and a young woman with a fishing net. And here's a woman in her bathing costume, and another one. And you can see they're both from probably the late 1800s, early 1900s, when they were still wearing, the dresses and the tights and all of that. And then here's a real fun, vintage beach photo. This one may be more from around 1920, but maybe not. I'm not sure. Her shoes look a lot like what some of them were wearing. So it's very hard to say sometimes. And this is a fun one. These were actually sort of like police, maybe not officially policemen, but they went around measuring how much knee and leg was exposed with the bathing costume, and you could be arrested. And even some of the people who would go swimming in the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan, had this same thing occurring. It just wasn't at the, the ocean shore. I'm not sure if this was just an American thing or if that happened worldwide, but you can see he's judging, will I need to arrest these ladies or not? And everybody, the children, they're all standing around watching, thinking, what's the big deal? They're just swimming. And here we're at the end. Oh, and my little bird, his beak got bent. I need to add a little glue there. And here you have the end, and it's another real good quote from the travel kit. All who wander are not lost, and take only memories. And finally, here is that other back page. And I used, again, some digital images, some die cuts. I'll glue that one down, too. And then here is a pocket along with the one in the front cover that I had in my stash. But it worked perfectly with this particular kit. Or journal. And so finally, just remember, there's so many papers at the Graphics Fairy. A lot of them are printables. Here's one, Endless Skies Tags with Quotes. I haven't used this one yet, but you know, these different quotes and phrases that I had in mind came from different bundles at the Graphics Fairy. You have the bundles to choose from. You can make your own ephemera kits just by copying and pasting the images onto your own Google document. So you can make your own ephemera, basically. You know, you have all the printable backgrounds and things like that just for background paper and making pockets and tags and such. But it's really a one-stop shop for everything you could need to make a journal. So I would encourage you, look at everything there, and also go to the archives, especially for vintage photos that you might not find in the bundles, or objects, some of the things that I found, maybe, like some of the electric utensils or telephones and things like that you might not find directly with a bundle right away. So I hope you were inspired by this and got some ideas. It sure was a lot of fun to make, and thank you again for stopping by to see Beyond the Boardwalk. Have a good day. Bye-bye.